Welcome to the City of Madeira Beach Local Planning Agency Planning Commission meeting, Monday, August 2nd, 2021 at 6 p.m. This meeting is now called to order. Can we have the roll call, please?
Chairman Noble.
Here.
Commissioner Wyckoff.
Here.
Commissioner Preston.
Here.
Commissioner Kerr.
Here.
Commissioner Brooks. Here. Commissioner Gaither.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, public comment. I don't know if we have anybody, but you are encouraged to participate. On to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. I discussed with Susan before, and they're reviewing them, and she'll have them for the June and July minutes for the next meeting. So on to new business, agenda item number 5.
So the Board of Commission referred this item to the Planning Commission with the intent to allow backyard chickens in R1 single-family residential and R2 low-density multifamily residential zones. The current code prohibits chickens in Section 10-2, so this amendment removes the chickens in that prohibition section and also creates a new section of the code to address backyard chickens in the residential zones. And that would be Section 10-15, backyard chickens, which is in front of you. So the new Section 10-15 allows backyard chickens only for personal use with limitation of size, location, and screening of the coop, fenced chicken enclosure, the allowed number of chickens, and prohibits roosters and the slaughtering of chickens on the premises. This section, the Section 10-15, was based on the Pinellas County's Code of Ordinances, Section 138-3351, backyard chickens, and that's just to be consistent with the county's code.
And staff recommends approval?
Yes.
Okay. Any comments from the commission? Any questions? Can we get a motion then?
I'll make a motion. It won't come on. I'll make a motion to approve Section 1015 being added.
I'll second. And go to the vote. Well, I guess I should have asked. We don't have anybody on cyberspace that wants to comment on this. No Zoom meeting, people? Okay, then let's go to the vote.
Okay, Commissioner Brooks.
Yes.
Commissioner Preston.
Yes.
Commissioner Gaither.
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr.
No.
Commissioner Wyckoff.
Yes.
Chairman Noble.
Yes.
All right, so the vote passes 5-1. I did get you, Commissioner Preston, correct? Okay. All right, 5-1. Passed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, agenda item B, under new business. Change text request by the City of Madeira Beach. Does the city have anything to say about that?
Yes, this is an amendment for Division 4 accessory structures. The Board of Commission also referred this item to the Planning Commission with the intent to amend the current codes to provide an equal opportunity for between R1 and R2 lots on the water for their accessory structures. So currently, the lots on the water in R1 is 30 feet. That's the setback for R1 principal structures. And in R2, it's 25 feet. So the Board of Commissions wanted that to be consistent. in both R1 and R2, and so we have amendment for the 25 feet in R1, and staff recommends approval.
Pretty self-explanatory. Any questions or comments?
I got we have in another part of the code, we have the definition of what those accessory structures are, right?
Yes, we do.
Thought so, okay.
And a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass the request for Division 4 accessory structures to be changed in R1 to 25 feet.
I'll second.
And we could go to the vote.
Commissioner Gaither,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Preston,
I abstain.
Commissioner Wyckoff,
Yes.
Chairman Noble.
Yes. Thank you. On to new business, Agenda C, text change request by the City of Madeira Beach to amending Chapter 14, Buildings and Building Regulations. What do we have going on there? The city...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a companion ordinance change. We recently went through the entire floodplain ordinance and made a large number of changes in order to bring it current with both FEMA standards and with building code. Now we need to come back and change Chapter 14, which is our ordinance referencing the building code to make sure that everything in there is consistent. So what you have in front of you is a number of text changes to do things such as include the flood hazard areas with the 4-foot freeboard, which you'll recall we just amended last time, or recommended amended for the last time it was through here. Talked about what the definition of structural fill is, the same as was conditioned or contained in the floodplain ordinance, to deal with things like enclosed areas and enclosures that are addressed by the building code, and also wind loading. These are just, some of these are updates that have been made already to the building code that we're referencing, and a lot of them actually came from FDEM, who are monitoring everybody's floodplain ordinance changes and their building code references for FEMA. And we went word by word through all of this with them. I wouldn't be surprised if they come back and ask for additional amendments later, because FEMA apparently has just last week issued another demand, but we'll come back to you with that when we research it a little bit better. But at this time, we want as quickly as possible to bring this section of the code into compliance with the changes that were just recommended for the floodplain ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir, Robert?
So I'm really confused
Okay.
is about the basement terminology in this.
Yes. There was
It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Right. So some of the language that's in here is required by state law to be addressed, even though it's not pertinent to our city. And as a matter of fact, we tried to take things out before, and FDEM stepped in and said, no, by law, you've got to have this minimal language in, even though you don't use that portion of the code, or it doesn't pertain to you directly. And one of those issues was the references to basement.
Okay, so that's something that they're not letting you take out.
Exactly.
Because it just didn't make any sense to me.
Thank you for the explanation. Any other questions?
I have one.
Right?
In regard to the fill, I know it was addressed in the
previous section that we talked about, and it was referenced to the area of the street level. If you're tearing down a home and replacing that home, and this may be something that just to take for consideration later, instead of basing it off of the street level, why wouldn't you base that garage level, I'll say, to the water level? Because the street level just seems to be an abstract number. It could change in the future, but the base flood elevation, that's a consistent, just like the, you're talking about the freeboarding, you're coming off of a set elevation, it'll be 4 foot above that base flood elevation.
Our streets are actually quite a bit higher than the normal sea level, and the reason for doing that is so that there's adequate drainage between the lot and the street to make sure that you're allowed to fill higher than the street level, because that's where your water needs to drain to from the front of the property. If we based it off the normal or average sea level, it would be considerably lower, but you know, you can see most of our lots are actually much higher than the water. So, and because the sea level changes, with time, we may have different elevations on the street, but the relationship between the yard and the street is always what's going to dictate how well the water flows off of the yard, and also how much of a rise you have coming off the street into the garage to make sure you have the opportunity to get up out of the drainage area.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is, okay, there was talk at one point of having, you know, for waterfront property, the retaining wall, the top of that at 5 foot above, and I know I'm not using the right term, but what is it, the term where the typical water level is?
The mean high water line?
The mean high water line. It was like 5, there was talk about having that as 5 feet.
Well, we haven't gotten into that yet. I mean, it's possible that will end up changing these regulations, including that, the floodplain ordinance. Right. But as of right now, we don't have enough research and science to show what the long-term impact of that is going to be in terms of scouring. And also, we haven't gotten the approval or even the review back from FDEM or FEMA that sort of change may actually cost us our entire CRS program. So that's something that we'd have to negotiate out with them over time and make sure that it's going to be something that can be supported, or that the community is willing to move forward without the support of FEMA and without the insurance deductions and all of that goes with a CRS.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out ways to be able to get that elevation up higher, not the other way around, higher than the
I understand.
than the street level.
We're all of the Barrier Islands in particular, but all the places right on water are looking for what are the ways to do that, and to do it in a way that's going to be supported by the state and FEMA. Right. And at this point, they've been decidedly unsupportive of anything that raised the seawalls to that level. So even when it was discussed at the Big C meeting, the Treasure Islands mayor said, just so you understand, if you decide to go down that path, which they are contemplating, you will lose your CRS rating and you will be removed from the program. There are really serious implications for that, not just the insurance deduction, but also the ability to issue federally backed mortgages within the city goes away.
Does the city or the Big C do they have someone that speaks on their behalf to FEMA to try to get some of these changes? It just doesn't make any sense to me that you can't bring Phil in to save your home. Yeah,
actually, FDEM is working on behalf of the Florida cities, and then on an individual basis, you have your floodplain managers who are trying to negotiate this out and work through this as a group. And we also are represented very well, actually, by the county's floodplain management floodplain manager, Lisa Foster, and we all work in concert to try to keep up to date with what our options are, and also to make suggestions continuously on how to make it work better for local governments.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead, Mike.
It's on page 15. It's section R322.3.6. It references enclosed areas below design flood elevation that are to be not more than 299 square feet.
Correct.
Does that preclude someone from building a two-car garage?
No. We have a lot of two-car garages, and usually where they're talking about an enclosure within the garage, like a subdivision within that. So usually that ends up, it will contain the foyer, an elevator, maybe a little bit of storage, but usually it's basically the entryway and foyer of a new development.
I'm confused then, because as I'm reading this, enclosed areas below the design flood elevation shall not be more than 299 square feet and shall be used solely for the parking of vehicles, building access, or storage. So it read to me that it would be, the garage could only be 299 square feet.
No, that won't work very well.
Not at all.
No, they're not including that. And this is a federal policy. It's across the board with FEMA projects, so we get a lot of experience on how to administer and a lot of support from FEMA.
So if you had a lawnmower storage room underneath your house, it can't be more than 299 square feet?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
And Linda, this is going forward, it's not retroactive, because we have a lot of homes that have enclosed more than 299 square feet.
If someone has, this has been in place a very long time.
I understand that.
And so if somebody has gone in and enclosed something they weren't supposed to, then no, we can't protect them. That's a code violation. They are in violation of the floodplain ordinance and in federal regulation. So usually what you're thinking of enclosed really is garage space. And that doesn't apply. We have a lot of really wide open spaces underneath people's houses, and they haven't broken them out into separate spaces. Then we just count them as big garages. The real problem comes in when people try to enclose their garage and turn it into another room, a rec room or something else downstairs, and they're air conditioning it. That's a violation of both the floodplain ordinance here locally and the federal policies through FEMA.
So to follow up on that so I can understand this, so you have 1,000 square feet on the bottom that has 4 walls except for garage doors on 2 sides. How does this apply to that?
It sounds like big, wide open garage space to me. If it's not broken out in any way underneath, it's probably just a great big garage. 4 walls, it's a garage.
Okay, so you're defining it as a living space, or?
It's a subdivided space within that on the ground floor. So you can have a garage, and it can be unair-conditioned space. It's not occupied space. So even if you close in the 299 square for your foyer, you can't air condition that, and the finishes you have to use down there need to be water-resistant type finishes. It's not supposed to be air-conditioned. It's not really fully finished occupiable space. You cannot have occupied space on the ground.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think it's pretty self-explanatory what they're looking to do. Yeah, I kind of, agree with Ray. It doesn't make sense the way you can't build it up to protect your property, and kind of leads a question on some of these. Like it's what, 18 inches from the center line of the street you can build up if you're doing new construction.
Correct.
Like, so if you're at 24 inches now, you would have to remove dirt to go to, if your slab was sitting on 24, you'd be able to keep that?
Yeah, if that was a natural condition.
No, I mean, it was filled in, say, you know, some of these buildings built 20 years ago, they built it up 36 inches. They would have, if they say they got torn down in a hurricane or knocked down, they would have to remove dirt to be able to rebuild, or would they be able to, because they kind of are grandfathered in?
They would probably be grandfathered in.
Okay.
And, you know, most of the buildings that were built within the last 20 years are going to stand up unless you're looking at a really big hurricane. That's why they're designed the way they are now. The water's supposed to be able to come through and then go back out. And that's FEMA's hang up with the elevations. It's not just what happens on your property, but what happens in the hydraulics of how the water moves. So if your house is really high, now when the water comes in, it moves around your property, which means it's scouring on the sides, which is somebody else's lot. So anything that we recommend or anything that we get approved is going to have to take into consideration the hydrology. How does the water move? What impact does that have on the property around it?
Okay. Any other questions, comments? And I guess the city is approving, so can we get a motion?
I'll make the motion that we approve TCH 2021-06 with the staff recommended amendments as presented.
Commissioner Gaither will second that.
And we go to the vote.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaither?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Chairman Noble?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries.
All right, thank you. On to agenda item number 6, old business. TCH 2021-07, text change request by the City of Madeira Beach to amend section 10-446. And what do we have to say about that, Linda?
Yeah, you may recall that we've already been through this. We were talking about hedges before, about how high hedges are. And it got to the commission. What we were trying at the time was to give hedges a definition because we were having trouble enforcing the code and because it's not been enforced all over town, so there's all kinds of inconsistencies. Partially because we can't get into backyards, so we rely for enforcement in the back on hedges to complaints by neighbors. And recent state statutes now require that we're not even allowed to accept a code complaint that is anonymous, and unless the person can prove somehow that by making them known it poses a danger to them. So if we see something, we can enforce it, but of course we do not have access or the right to go into people's yards looking for things. If we can see it from the neighbor's yard, that's one thing, but we now have some question about how we're supposed to enforce these things. So when I got to the City Commission with these issues, they decided to kind of open up the conversation not only to what is a hedge, because that was originally what we were talking about, was just what is a hedge, to the being why are we regulating hedge height along the backyard. So in this particular case, we get to the definition of what is a hedge in a moment, but in this case, what they're talking about is currently hedges are required to drop to the same height as a fence. So along your side yard, you can have a 6-foot hedge, but when you get perpendicular to the wall of the house, it drops down to 4 foot if you have a kind of open fence, or 3 foot if there's no fence there and it's serving as a wall. And as you can see, any place you look out the window, that's not been universally enforced because that's all in the backyard. And the commissioners discussed among them, and they seemed kind of uncertain. I wouldn't say that they're ready to vote on it, but they did refer back to you the issue of why don't we just allow hedges to grow to their full height. They did not want to change the fence regulations, but they wanted to allow people to have higher hedges, just natural plant material. So because it's a referral, we referred that back to you and wrote it up in the way they were suggesting it would be required to be written to allow for the planted material in a hedge to grow to its full height in backyards. That can be significant because people use plants for hedges that are actually trees. And so in a lot of cases, that could just end up being a line of trees. Aruga palms are one of the things that a lot of people use as a hedge here. And the original intent was to address that kind of planting along with the other things people put in as part of the hedge. For instance, I'm sure we've all been in other places, or even in St. Pete, you could see it around, where people will use a column of brick and then a planting of hedge and then a column of brick. I mean, it is a hedge, but it's got more than just plants in it. And we wanted to address what's the definition of a hedge, just to be able to enforce what we already have. But their thought here was, in the backyards, why are we regulating? And again, they weren't uniformly set on a direction, but they did want to refer it back as a possibility for your discussion.
Yeah, we've had this come before us several times, and it just makes more sense to me that the hedge should match the fence. You know, we're going to end up having, people just put in some of these hedges, and they're going to, we're not regulating it now, so they could be putting in some of these ficus trees that grow to 60 feet and encroach over the neighbor's yards. And I know the neighbor can trim it at the property line, but I don't know, any other questions or comments?
I do. A lot, actually. So the other part of that conversation that the BOC had on this topic was enforcement. And it was, if we don't enforce it, and we don't enforce it uniformly, why do we have it? And I agree with that sentiment 100%. And it's the idea that we cannot see behind somebody's property is kind of out the wind with Google Earth. Mm-hmm. You can see everything that's going on.
We can, but we're not allowed to use that. We're not allowed to fly drones. We're not allowed to take pictures from the water. We're not allowed to do that. And so because we can't enforce anything unless we see it, it is going to be inconsistent from one place to another. But having the regulation in place gives the neighbors an assurance that if something is bothering them, they can complain about it, and there is a code to protect them. If the measure is that we never enforce anything that we cannot uniformly enforce, then we can enforce nothing in any backyard ever, because we cannot uniformly guarantee we can see that and that the neighbors are, in fact, comfortable with complaint. And that's often the case. People will come in and say, I'm having a problem with this, but I don't dare say anything. My neighbor's aggressive or hostile. It happens pretty regularly, actually. This is a really common complaint that the hedges are too high. And it's usually on the water situation because here we can see the backyard, or we can't inspect and go up onto the backyard, but other people can see it. So it does kind of affect that kind of open view. And that may not be important to the community any longer. At some point it was. And if you're going to have fences at a particular height, but you can allow hedges to be, like you said, 60 feet, I'm not sure what point in the fence is except safety, really. But why regulate that by height either? So it's going to create a bit of a conflict, I'm sure. But we already have some of a conflict because, like I said, what the code does right now is it gives the neighbors some kind of assurance and some rights to protect their own property or the effects of somebody else's property and value on theirs.
I understand that argument. But the perception is, and probably at the beginning when they were talking about the open view, and we had discussed this before, is that this was prior to boat lifts and things like this. With the advent of boat lifts and stuff, you no longer have a view up and down the canal. It's gone. All you see is boats. So the perception of being able to look down the canal over the top of boats and see other boats and stuff like that's totally different. And so, and I know this discussion has come up both in here and it's come up in the BOC. So what is the city looking at? What is the property owner does he have a right to view down the canal? Well, if that's the case, then you have to take the boats off the boat lift because you can't see down the canal. That's the same thing. Most of the views on the properties, if you look at any of these, they're at the straight out the back. The other part of it is that you have houses that are set back from the property line, like my neighbor's, it's like 15 feet from the seawall, that house. And then you have others on larger lots that you have setbacks that are 40 feet, even 50 feet. And the rules are different for the 50-foot person than it is for the 15-foot person. Mm-hmm. So we have all these inconsistency built into it that because the person that just built his house later has to build back from the seawall a certain distance.
It's usually the other way around. Usually people who are sitting back further are in the older house, and when the newer people come in, they make a lot more use of the property. They're building their big 35-foot structures up front, but the older house can't put up a 6-foot fence, but the neighbors can put up a 35-foot house. And I've brought that, our longer-term members will remember that we came through this and even recommended resolving that to the City Commission, and then it failed. That's something, as a separate issue, you could also refer back to us to say, let's take that through again and revisit it, because that, you're right, does create it's an unfair situation.
And so I don't think this is ready for prime time. There's too many issues with it to be ready for prime time. Because the city has not decided what is your view, for one. What is your right of view?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of it, just having unlimited height, because there's more to it than just the view. There's, the breeze that goes through and the encroachment on your property if somebody puts in a spreading bamboo that's gonna be 45 feet tall, it's gonna start growing on your side of the fence, and now you're maintaining your yard, you're having to trim their bamboo back. I know there's certain bamboo that doesn't grow, but if it's just a hedge, you can trim it and it's designed or they grow that way. Some of this stuff, you grow it and then you're gonna cut it, it's gonna kill the tree. You know, that's what I'm afraid of. They put in these punk trees back, I know you can't put those in anymore, but they used to use those, and it just makes a huge mess along the fence, and then the fence is falling over from the roots. And, you know, I personally would rather look at a boat on a boat lift than a line of trees that's blocking the sun from, maybe I have a pool, and now I gotta deal with their leaves falling in my pool. So I'm against the height. I think it's, our forefathers designed it this way for a reason, and there's more than just the view. I think that, you know, the view is nice. You don't want to be staring over someone's backyard all the time, but the breeze and the sun also, for me, is part of it. Any other comments?
I have a comment. I believe that the hedgerow should be limited to whatever the fence line is. Not all water views are equal. If you're in a canal, you have a different water view than if you're looking over the Boca Ciega, and you want to be able to look down the Johns Pass. Or if you're out at the end of the canal and your property line is pie-shaped, and you may have a neighbor that wants a high hedge, and you may be in favor of it. So you work it out, and he has a high hedge. It's not brought to the commission. They're not gonna, unless it's a complaint, there's not gonna be an issue. Now, if there's a complaint and that high hedge is an issue, it defaults back to what's in the ordinance. If you get on your boat or you just take a walk and you look in backyards, you're gonna see a lot of high vegetation between yards. But that's apparently worked out between the neighbors. If there's a complaint, there's a way to view that other than going into the person's backyard. So I don't see any reason to change what we currently have.
Is there a methodology by which we can segregate non-waterfront and waterfront properties in these ordinances too? Because I can see the logic in a non-waterfront property allowing you to have taller vegetation for privacy, whatever, that makes sense to me. But when you talk about waterfront properties, then you do infringe on someone else's view and things like you know, I know...
This is already segregated, because you can have a 6-foot fence completely surrounding the backyard of a non-waterfront property, but you cannot do that on a waterfront. So it's already a tiered approach.
Right, but this hedge then says you can let it grow to whatever height you want to, and that still includes waterfront properties, correct?
Correct. That was the part that... It's even harder to see the others.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and I don't think there's no way to paint this picture with one brushstroke, and because of the unique makeup of the way our streets are curved in all different angles, and we have points, and we have small fingers, and we have narrow canals, we have wide canals, we have open water views, you know, and then you take into beachfront properties, the few single-family homes that are there, that you could impinge on somebody's view with too high of a hedge. I mean, I like the idea of being able to sort of do what you want to until the neighbor complains, but I do think there needs to be something in there that if it gets to be just too much, the neighbor should have the vehicle to have that not monitored, wrong word, but some sort of enforcement to that so that you're not overtaking your neighbor's yard with your own stuff. And I'm not sure how to eloquently say that. It's just not coming out right, but I think you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
No, we said this last time this came up, that, you know, fences make good neighbors and hedges make enemies. So why are we going to make enemies of the neighbors? You know, it's already in there for a reason, and I think they thought it through in the old days, and it makes sense to me to keep it low, as high as the height of the fence. I believe that's the way it is now. If you have a chain link fence, They could have a see-through hedge up to the 4 feet, or if it's solid, they could have a hedge to 3 feet.
Yeah.
I'm fine with the way it is. If anybody wants to make an amendment or any other comments.
How would you-
I'm sorry, a motion.
How would you make a motion to basically keep it the way it is? Would you,
To recommend denial.
you would recommend it? Okay. I'd like to make a motion to recommend denial of ordinance number 2020-19.
That.
Can we go to the vote?
Commissioner Kerr?
I vote to deny.
So I guess that's a yes.
Yes, okay.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Gaither?
Yes.
Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Commissioner Wykoff?
Yes.
Chairman Noble?
Yes. All right, very good.
Motion carries.
Old business, agenda item 6B, TCH 2021-08, text change request by the City of Madeira Beach to amend the definition of hedges. Is that still relevant?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, originally, this is what we were doing, was coming to you with a new definition of hedges that included more than just shrubs, because that's all our code says now is shrub, and then it defines shrubs as being small plants with woody trunks. So when people come in and they use more tropical plantings for hedges, it gets out of control, and there's no really or definition for any other form of hedge. So we wanted to make it clear that more than one thing can contribute to creating that wall or the edge, and there are more than one way of doing it. As I said, there are places where they'll use brick columns or pieces of art or whatever. If you're creating a hedge with a combination of just plants or a combination of planting and other things, that the height of that be defined and regulated consistently. And so what's proposed is a definition of hedges that involves more than just plant material, and that also specifies that a thing is not a hedge if it has breaks in it. So individual plantings of ornamentals or feature plants do not constitute a hedge if they're not creating a more or less continuous line. And so if they've got breaks of 3 feet between the planting or the reaches of the plants or whatever it is you've used for the hedge, then that doesn't constitute a hedge. That's just a series of art or plantings separately. And to define what height that opening needs to occur at. So the point is you can have trees where the canopies start touching each other, but as long as the trunks are separated and you can see past them, that's not a hedge.
Any questions?
So I have one question.
Go ahead, Marie.
So in this, where it says that the natural plant material of the hedge may be allowed to grow to natural height?
That would also have to be changed now that
Okay.
the other, yes. So we would recommend, if you recommend to approve this, you would recommend to approve it with the condition that it be made consistent with the definition of hedge as it stands now in terms of height, that the height be regulated, consistent with walls and fences would be the best way to do that.
Which basically, breaking it down means they would have to trim it at 4 feet or 3 feet, solid.
Correct.
If it was a solid one. Or if
Correct.
it was see-through, they could go to 4 feet.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I do have a question. So, trees are not classified as hedges or,
Not unless they create that solid line, that edge or wall effect.
So the
Screening
trees,
is
so the trees
screening.
can be all along any length of the property?
As long as
You have
there's
a 3x6 window.
a 3x6 window between the trunks. Most trees can't be planted that close or they won't survive, but yeah, you'd need at least a 3x6 window between their trunks.
Thank you.
Like oleanders come to mind. They're nice little bushes when you put them in, and if you don't keep them trimmed, they'll stay nice and trim. If you trim them, if you don't, they're going to be 30 feet in 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And thick wood, and, you need a chainsaw to trim them, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's something I know a lot of people have used as hedge in the past, and I like the, making sure that we keep it trimmed at the 3 feet. Any other questions, or get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to ordinance 2018 on the condition that it be made consistent with the definition of the wall and fence height already in the ordinances.
I'll second that.
Does that work for what you need, Linda?
Yes.
Okay, can we go to the vote?
That was you who seconded me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaither,
Yes.
Commissioner Preston,
Yes.
Commissioner Wykoff,
Yes.
Chairman Noble.
Yes.
Thank you,
All
motion
right,
carries.
good job, everybody. On to agenda item 7, administrative staff presentation. We have nothing underneath there this evening.
We don't. I do want to make a point, however, and I'll be getting more information to you, that we've had a couple of abstentions this evening, and I'm pretty sure they're very strict laws about when you can abstain, and it usually has something to do with your having a personal interest in the item. If you attend a meeting, you're expected to vote, but I'll find out exactly what the state of the current statutes are in that regard and get more information out to you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that was a little new one this evening.
Thank you.
Agenda item 8, Planning Commission. Nobody submitted anything for discussion. Our next meeting, agenda item 9, will be September 13th because Labor Day will be on the 6th. September 13th, 2021, 6 p.m. I think that should be good for everybody. Agenda item 10, informational materials, nothing. And with that, good job. Meeting is adjourned.